My name is George Crocker. I'm the Executive
Talk
Director
loud.
of the North American Water Office, which is a nonprofit that my wife and I co-founded in 1982. As a result of work that we'd been doing, actually it grew out of a big power line fight across west central Minnesota. So ever since then, we've been working on the relationship between energy development, the environment, economic development, and public health, social justice issues. How do those issues fit together or not as society goes about making decisions on how to provide energy services? And so that's involved a whole lot of just public organizing and educating. It's involved intervening in a wide variety of administrative and judicial proceedings and legislation, in direct intervention with the electric utilities and electric utility executives, all with the intent of accelerating the penetration of the modern technologies and the expeditious retirement of the obsolete central station machines that are causing so much trouble in terms of acid rain and global warming and particulate contamination and nuclear contamination and mercury contamination and all of this other social disparities that come from it, the inequities that are built in to centralized economic operations. And so with that in mind, perhaps a good place to start is the fact that in 1978, why Congress passed what they called the Public Utilities Regulatory Policy Act, PURPA. And what PURPA required was that electric utilities they were required to purchase energy from what they called qualifying facilities, which were renewable energy projects that were less than 80 megawatts. Is essentially what was the requirement. So if you had a qualifying facility that produced clean power from renewable sources at less than 80 megawatts, the power company, the regulated monopoly power company, was required to purchase power from your facility. And that was in the wake of, maybe you remember Jimmy Carter sitting with his sweater on and urging everybody to get to deprive themselves and become more conservative of energy and all of that. Well, the utilities didn't like that idea too much, and it was 10 years of litigation before it became fully ensconced in statute, but it did. And then the fight was on. Okay, there was a requirement to purchase, but at what price? And so the utilities settled on, the law said at the avoided cost. So the fight was over what is the avoided cost of power. And the utilities made the argument, and made it stick, that the avoided cost was essentially the value of the fuel that they did not burn in their existing generation facilities. That amounts to maybe a penny and a half, or at the most 2 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity, which is not enough to cash flow almost anything, which is why we have almost no PURPA projects in operation, despite the fact that we've got 30 years now or so of a requirement to purchase. Well, so that's the problem, but that sort of sets the stage, because maybe you remember in the late 1990s, there was competition that was injected into electric utility markets. There was all of the independent power producers started to come online with the Enron. Remember the Enron and all of the rolling blackouts that we had in California, because independent power producers were now allowed to put power into the grid, and there was huge disruptions and huge disparities and massive corruption that accompanied that. But one of the things that it did was begin to inject competition into the energy marketplace, and over time that competition evolved into what eventually became, and is now, a quite mature and sophisticated wholesale market across the country. Now, some jurisdictions allow for retail competition, many don't, but throughout the country now we have wholesale competition, which means that if I own a power plant, why, I have the right to bid into the marketplace at the price that I can afford to produce my power. And if my bid into the marketplace is lower than the going price of power at any point in time, I get to play. And the entity that decides what the market price is called the independent system operators. There's 6 or 7 of them around the country. California has one. We're in the MISO, the Midwest Independent System Operator, which is a big footprint from Indiana to the other side of Dakota, up into Canada, south into Missouri, maybe even a little further south. There's several on the eastern seaboard. But these independent power operators, these ISOs, are the ones that run the grid. They operate the transmission system, and they are the ones that accept these bids that all of the utilities, even the regulated monopolies, they bid in their power. The regulated monopolies can bid it in such a way that they are virtually assured. They are assured that their bids will be competitive, and so they're essentially on anyway, just like they would ordinarily be. But if I'm an independent producer and I'm bidding power at $50 a megawatt hour, which translates roughly to 5 cents a kilowatt hour, and the price of power is anything higher than that, what I get to put my power to the market because I'm competitive. That's what a market is. If you're cost competitive in the market, you get to play. If your price is too high, you can't play because your price is too high. And so then I'd have to curtail my generation. If the price during the load duration curve, if the price dropped below that 5 cents per kilowatt hour, I'd have to cease production because I'm no longer competitive. So the load duration curve is simply reflective of the fact that as people wake up in the morning where they start to use more power, that power consumption continues through the day and then it tapers off again at night when people go to sleep. We're always using power, some amount of power, all of the time. So if you draw a line at that point in the load duration curve below which power is stable, that's the base load. So those power plants that serve in that intermediate zone where the load is swinging, they're the intermediate plants, and they follow the load throughout the day. Every once in a while when the sun's really shining hot and there's a big spike in power use because everybody turns their air conditioner on, those are the peaking times. And so we have peaking plants that are designed specifically to come on rapidly to fill that need, and then when that spike is over, why they turn them off again. Well, so that's the conventional base load, intermediate, and swing. So one of the problems that the electric utility industry has right now with the modern technologies coming in and increasingly competing for serving that power that's consumed under the load duration curve is that the economies of scale for the conventional plants are based on size. In other words, the bigger you made particularly your base load and your intermediate load plants, the bigger they were, the cheaper each unit of production was. So they kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until they ran into some limit physically. But that means that we have a relatively few very, very large plants. All of the nuclear plants are base load plants. Many coal plants are. Some coal plants are intermediate plants. Peak plants tend to be natural gas burners. But now with the modern systems, the economies of scale are entirely different. They're based on how many of them we make on manufacturing. The more of them we make in batches or on assembly lines, the cheaper each unit becomes, which means we want to make lots and lots of them. And that means we want to spread them out all over the place, not centralized, but dispersed and distributed. So those are fundamentally different dynamics that are in play. Those are paradigm shifters that are now at work with in terms of which technologies get deployed to provide these services. And so what happens when we have more and more and more dispersed and distributed generators coming on, which are available when the wind's blowing or available when the sun's shining, or maybe you got some storage capacity that you can use, whether it's batteries or crop residues, biofuel systems that can follow a load and be dispatchable. The point is that there's a whole lot of them and they're scattered around and about, and they tend to come on and come off at somewhat irregular intervals, and that is really, really disruptive to the power engineers who are trying to maintain the amount of power that is being produced at any point in time exactly matching the amount of power that is consumed at any point in time. Because if you don't, you're going to be melting wires, or you're going to be burning out transformers if you're producing too much. And if you're not producing enough, your voltages collapse and your system will go down. So you have to match at every instant in time, 24/7, 365 days a year. Every minute of every hour, the amount of energy produced must match the load. That's really hard to do when you're injecting all of these, many now thousands and thousands and thousands of dispersed and distributed generation facilities, while you have to maintain the base load of 1,000-megawatt increments that come from reactors and big coal plants. Very difficult to do. And so that is part of the dynamic that is driving the transition that we're into. And so as we've injected these MISO, these independent system operators, to manage the market, the way that they define what the price of power is the cost of delivering power to any point in the system at any given point in time. So now take a hypothetical situation in which you as a consumer are paying 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Okay, 10 cents. So of that 10 cents, roughly 4 of it is for the generator at the power plant. About 3 of it is for the big high voltage transmission system to deliver that power to the load centers. And then the remaining 3 is to operate the distribution system to deliver the power to the individual consumer places, whether it's industrial or commercial or residential. So in the independent market, all that's determined by the MISO, why the way they define the price of power to deliver to any point in time and space is the cost of delivered power. So if you take that 10 cents that I was talking about to deliver power to a substation that is serving a community, that cost is roughly the 4 cents for the generation and the 3 cents for the transmission. 7 cents to deliver power to that location. Okay, so now here we have the fundamental contradiction that is driving our ability to move quickly towards deployment. So now we're to the point of understanding the dynamic that we can use to inject community-based energy at a large scale. Because while the purpose says they have to purchase, but the utilities are saying, oh, but we only have to purchase at our avoided cost, which is 2 cents, not enough to cash flow. While at the same time, the wholesale market has the price of delivered power to a point right next to a community at about 7 cents. That's a contradiction. So now if you're a developer, you can go to court and say, well, this is not fair. Under PURPA, they have to purchase. And my price is less than 7 cents, which is what you pay in anyway to do it. Why is that not the avoided cost if I'm avoiding that 4 cents and that 3 cents? And we will win that case, and we have won. But it's a rare developer who is willing to take the risk and the time and the expense in those kinds of markets to challenge the utility industry in that regard. And the fact that there are a couple who have done it heroically means that we now have the track record that allows us to go forward and say that we can establish a market price for power based on a power purchase agreement that recognizes not just the cost of the fuel not burned, but the actual localized marginal price as defined by existing markets in the electric utility industry.
Got it.
So that's what we're doing. And we're calling that an avoided cost tariff. It will be somewhere usually in the 4 to the 6 cent range, which is plenty enough to cash flow many projects. And then, so we're going to do that through Public Utilities Commission proceedings with it, filing complaints and filing for tariffs for those kinds of prices and ability to negotiate prices through through power purchase agreements. And then we're also going to legislators and saying we want to pass legislation in such a way that the projects that qualify for the tariff that we're asking the Public Utilities Commission to establish, they have to have a public face. They have to be public benefits entities. So it could be a local unit of government, could be a nonprofit organization. It could be a school or a university or a hospital, but some entity, a local economic development entity of some sort. But it has to be a way in which the public benefit of doing this kind of development accrues to the community that's serving the power. And one of the ways that we can ensure that is by sizing these projects in such a way that they'll fit almost anywhere. The transmission grid, the high voltage system tends to be constrained. In other words, there's a whole lot more generation out there, as there needs to be, capacity that's available to produce power than what we're using at any point in time. And if there weren't, why, we'd have blackouts. So there is, and that's what the job of MISO is in the market, to sort out which of those generators goes now. But they all tend to be relatively large. And so they need to have the access to the high voltage system. And in order to do that, you've got to queue up with the MISO and get a very sophisticated and very expensive study done, transmission access study done, so you're not burning up transformers and causing blackouts and brownouts and disrupting the system. But if you're small enough, and small enough means 5 megawatts or less, which is still a huge chunk of power. These are big machines. These are the wind turbines with 80-foot high towers and wingspans that span acres. So they're large utility scale machines. But if you take 2 of them and put them 600 or 800 meters apart, so that they're plenty spaced out, they're not in each other's wind shadows, and fill in the space in between with a panel of solar collectors, wind photovoltaic array, why, now you have a hybrid system that can almost be guaranteed to be delivering some amount of power to the system at its peak. Now that's valuable. So you have more to offer to the system than just raw energy when the wind happens to be blowing. You have capacity value that you're bringing, which is, so if you have projects that are in that 5 megawatts or less range, 1 to 5 megawatts, well, you get expedited transmission access. It's cheaper and it's quick. It's immediate that you can gain access to the transmission, because all of the power, if you locate these projects on the high voltage side of a substation that's serving a community, virtually all of the power produced by your project is pretty much guaranteed to be consumed within that community, and if it's not, it'll be the next community down the road that uses it. And we'll never be pushing power back onto the high voltage system and causing disruptions and curtailments from that perspective. So size is critical, but size is also important because at that community scale, with a public benefits entity that is attached to that community, it means that we're producing economic development for that community, we're producing jobs for that community in terms of maintenance and construction and operations of the facility. We're generating local wealth for that community. We're preventing the exportation of dollars, energy dollars that would otherwise go out of our community to cartel players that are far away and have totally different agendas. And the environment's along for the ride with it. We don't have to worry about the carbon for the climate chaos or the mercury poisoning or the nuclear waste, because we've got our own with it. And so when we get legislation that establishes the criteria for access to this tariff that the Public Utilities Commission enacts, that allows us to have these kinds of projects to cash flow in community after community, why, then we can also start to serve the large urban centers, because we can establish partnerships between large urban centers and communities around about who could develop these kinds of projects, again, without disrupting the system, but enabling them to partner up with the local entity, and while they might not be using the power from that specific generation, they'd be displacing power that the utility system would otherwise be transporting large distances. And so they can gain economic benefit from that as well. And that's a way that we can grow the system step by step and point by point in such a way that we can rapidly deploy a large number of dispersed and distributed generation, and in a relatively short time phase out the kinds of generation, obsolete generation, that is causing so much trouble in terms of irradiated fuel and climate chaos. So that's on the supply side. Now, the other thing that we're working towards has to do with, there's a supply side component, but it's also on the demand side, because so often people who are low income people, or people living in apartments that have landlords that don't give a shit, are stuck with very inefficient appliances, obsolete technologies to perform functions. They're paying exorbitant amounts, exorbitant fractions of their income for energy, often 40, 50%, whereas the average person, the average, middle class or upper class person is spending maybe 2 or 5% of their income for energy. So those disparities are real, and we need to identify mechanisms to address them. And a mechanism that can do that is called tariff-based inclusive financing. The tariff-based simply refers to the fact that the electric utility serving that load has access to capital that it can gain a return on its investment from if it uses it for the right purpose. And the right purpose would be to, say, buy a new refrigerator for a person living in an apartment building. And because the person living in that apartment building happens to now have a more efficient refrigerator, why their energy bill goes down, because they're not using as much electricity. And because their energy bill goes down, we can capture that savings. Part of that savings is used to pay the capital that was used to purchase the refrigerator, and the utility gets a return on that, so they should be happy. The other fraction of that saving goes to the consumer because he's using less electricity, or she. And they're happy because their energy bill goes down. Society's happy because we have less pollution. So instead of trying to convince a set of decision makers to make different decisions when they never will, we've figured out a way to inject a competition, not at technology versus technology, but rather who makes the decision in terms of which technologies get deployed, and bringing that decision making to play at the city council level, where the elected officials are much, much, much closer to their constituents than they are certainly with public utilities commissioners or electric utility executives or even state legislators. And so that's why we're getting some traction. This, like I say, is the nation's first city utility partnership. It gained some recognition from the Obama White House. The Mayor Hodges actually had to go off to Rome and the Vatican to talk to the Pope about it. So there is some traction to it. The work plans are developing. It's new, it's innovative. We don't have a long track record yet, but we have a whole lot of opportunity to really make this work. And one of the things that's most encouraging to me is that the team that's working on it it's a really, really strong and powerful team, and it's dominated by young people.
That's great.
So it doesn't get any better. So there we go.
There we go. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome.
And I will let you know what happens.
Okay, no.